Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. What's the most fucked up thing someone has told you about themselves after barely getting to know them? I sat next to this quiet kid in my Spanish class. He was awkward and had a subtle speech impediment. One day, I tried to spark conversation with him and he told me that he considered murdering his parents. I was seated next to a quiet kid on a high school band bus to a football game. He'd been in my band class for years, but I had never really spoken to him. He was the type who didn't fit into anything at school that I ever saw. I resolved to get to know him a bit and open up a conversation since we were going to be sitting by each other for a few hours. It was like a dam burst. That dude talked for the whole trip. At one point, he told me that his mom was really unhappy with his stepdad but couldn't afford to divorce him. And then he told me that his stepdad would get drunk and beat him with a stick, but he wasn't sure if his mom was also getting beaten and that scared him. There was a brief pause before he said, "I never told anyone that before." Then he changed the subject completely. I must have been 17 or so. It shook me. Obviously I was old enough to know that sort of thing happens, but too sheltered to think it happened to anyone I knew. I told my parents about it. Seemed the right thing to do. I don't know what happened from there. He and I never really spoke of it again. I just looked him up on Facebook, though. Looks like he's done really well for himself. Coworker took out a client for a business lunch at a small town restaurant. He asks the waitress, "How are you?" to be polite. She proceeds to go on a 5-minute spiel about how terrible her ex-husband is and how he's ruining her life and how she feels like crap because of it. After she finishes, takes their order and leaves, the customer says, "So you must know her pretty well?" "Only well enough to say hi in passing." "Oh, so then that was just as awkward for you as it was for me then?" Yes it was. I used to work at an animal shelter and we had several people who would come volunteer to help out. One of the women who came there on a regular basis went to lunch with me. She was such a sweet woman, a little older than I was at the time. She proceeded to tell me that she used to go to the park and give old men blowjobs because she felt sorry for them. WTF? I was doing my practice in a hospital. They brought a young man in the neuroclinic. He was my first patient. He was around 30 and he had fallen from a tree while working. He turned out to have a complicated neurological condition that had nothing to do with his fall. He was also diagnosed with severe depression. He was in there for months and no one ever visited him. The only time he felt a bit better was when I visited him and did some tests to him. He said, "It's nice when you come and make me play with the colored toys and make me draw things." One day he was looking out of the window. When I came in, he looked me dead in the eye and told me, "If the windows didn't have protective bars, I'd jump right out." It was the first time I'd heard such thing and I remember it ever since. At 10 o'clock at night, I was at a rest stop and a guy came up to me and asked, "How would you like to save a life? Tell me a joke and I may not kill myself." Some guy next to me on the bus once went into a long elaborate story about how he burned his house down for insurance money like 3 weeks prior. I wouldn't have believed it if his hands didn't have massive burn scarring. I was temping at an office and the trainer told me about her ex. He was cheating on me, not just with one woman but many different women. "That's terrible," I replied, thinking we'd move on. Nope. No, it was worse than that. He filmed himself shagging the women, and then streamed the compilation of his conquests onto our TV, for me to watch. I was unsure of what to say and after a couple of minutes of me being quiet she then said, "When it was Valentine's Day a few days later, he gave me a present. He let me start unwrapping the present. In Pass the Parcel style, each layer had a used condom that he'd used to shag the women in his compilation video. To say I was sat there not knowing what the FCK to say is an understatement. Worked with a new girl one night, literally didn't know her name. She told me about every sexual experience of her life, that she wanted to try anal, but kept having flashbacks to her uncle raping her, how her mom whirled invite guys over for a train when she was a teen, and a ton more. Bonus point, she turned me into HR because she told her fiancé that she told me all this. He freaked out, so she lied and told them I harassed her. I picked up a hitchhiker once that told me he left California after his wife died because the cops were asking too many questions. I dropped him off in the next town and he paid me with a beer and we parted way. Had to do a course and the trainer arrives. Introduced himself to the small class of maybe 4 to 5 people and asked a bit about each of us. He then told us his wife had died 2 years ago and he tried to kill himself. I felt horrible for him, but he seemed genuinely happy with where his life was. I ended up staying back after class and having a beer with him at the bar. He was a really cool guy. I hope he is still happy. A co-worker implied there was illegal activity going on among the hospital staff. It was my first day. Randomly met a fellow motorcycler at a gas station at 2 a.m., told me he was going to confront his wife and her lover. Not right then, just in general. Then we rode the last 100 miles to St. Louis because he happened to be going the same way. Met a woman who worked child care. She told me all about how difficult it was working with abused boys and how she got too close to one and had sexual feelings. Showed me a picture and said anyone who meets him thinks he is really nice and not to judge him on looks. Then the barman came back with my drink and I left. That was the entirety of conversation with a very drunk and probably shitty social worker. Just started a new job, said good morning to a lad there. His reply, I've just found out my lass has been getting back scuttled behind my back. I didn't even know his name. I'm a man at an airport once. I was there on layover so I had some time to kill. I bought a book from the bookstore and went and sat at what my gate was supposed to be. I was 21 at the time maybe. It was kind of crowded and there was a man in his 40s sitting next to me. We chatted for a bit. I was just entering a program for my PTSD. I can't remember how the conversation got started. But we ended up talking about mental illness, life, rebuilding after said trauma, and how sometimes we inactively choose or actively choose to remain in terrible situations. He mentioned to me how he was repeatedly molested from ages 8 to 13 by his Catholic priest. When his parents found out, his dad beat the priest until he had to be hospitalized. The mom and him ended up moving with the other siblings to a new state. And how he didn't recognize for over 10 years that his extremely rebellious teenage years, his drug use, his drugged up relationships, was because he was not processing the past. He gave me a great bit of advice that I ended up using. Sometimes what you really need is a change of scenery. He talked about how in his mid-20s he got therapy, and once therapy ended he moved. He packed what little he had and moved. Worked 2 jobs to put himself through college. Now on a few businesses. It is much happier and successful in his life. He made it a point to tell me that if you run from your problems they'll always catch you. However, if you confront your problems you're then free to go wherever you want. That was almost 10 years ago. And it made me really stick through therapy. And I took his advice and I moved. It was amazing. For a long while it was just what I needed. Unfortunately, isolation is putting me back into a pre-therapy mindset. And not too healthy. And I'm going back for more mental health work. But I still think of that layover I had at O'Hare Airport. Not technically the question, but my mother was an avid oversharer. It wasn't until I was older that I started to realize just how uncomfortable she would make people. There's a lot of stuff she would pass off as normal, or even joke about, that was really weird. The first time I met a friend in person from online, she spent the entire time telling his mom about how I was maybe sexually assaulted but she wasn't sure, and then about her own sexual experiences. Within a week of moving here my husband had learned about her abortions, how she'd lost her virginity, how I was probably harmed as a kid but who knows. About my f-king brother's sex life, about how he's not having good sex with his wife, and so many more things that he really didn't need to know. My manager at my job in high school decided to tell us about her suicide attempt on my very first day. She was like, one day, I decided to take some pills and end it all. I grabbed a pill bottle out of my mom's cabinet and took a handful without even looking at what it was and then lay down to die. I was so surprised to wake up in the morning perfectly fine. Confused, I checked the bottle to see what I had taken. Yeah, it was estrogen. Met an old friend's girlfriend one day. Well, he was hardly a friend and more of like a friend of a friend. We hung out one day, his girlfriend was with us, first time meeting her, and that night she randomly sent me nudes and said that her boyfriend wanted to have a threesome with her and myself. I kindly declined. If they asked me today, I'd hop on that faster than a frog onto a lily pad. Not sure if this is effed up, definitely nowhere near what I have read on this thread already. Met this dude in college when he moved into the dorm. Goofy looking redneck kid from the San Antonio area. I'm getting to know him when I notice his Spice Girls CD, this was like 2003, and I commented on it. He then goes into this long story of how he was at the Walmart in San Antonio, looking at the CDs in that store and just happened to have bumped into Ginger Spice, who invited his underage ass into the tour bus that no one had noticed, and he lost his virginity to all the Spice Girls at once. My thought was, thank you for this story, I know instantly that I can never trust or believe anything you ever tell me again. It's been almost 20 years and I still can't believe that was something he said in the first 5 minutes of meeting me. Apparently I have a face that says confess your darkest secrets to me. In high school I had a lab partner start off by saying she's in a new foster home and she'll be a great partner cause they basically let her do her own things so she'll always be available to study. Not knowing where this would go, I asked if that was different than her previous home. What I got in response was just an avalanche of horror, including at least this place didn't watch me shower. Only thing I could think of after was to ask if she was okay. Do I need to say something to someone? She did turn out to be an excellent lab partner though. In college I had 2 girls tell me about their sexual assaults pretty close to meeting them. Those threw me for a loop and I had to ask my female friends, is there something I throwing out there that say I'm dangerous? They all said it's the opposite, I make people feel comfortable. Had a coworker ask me to help her submit something to a radio station contest. I got to the part about her formerly working in porn and escorting cause her daughter needed to eat. Had to tap out on that and suggested maybe she just come over and borrow my computer and submit this herself. My wife loves to tell this story. Her first day at a new company, she was to meet another employee who would show her around the office. She met her in the lobby and on the elevator ride up to the office she proceeded to tell my wife how her husband has gained some weight and she is considering starting an office affair with a coworker who is really into fitness and has muscles. Apparently she made a gesture where she fanned herself while saying muscles. Like literally, my wife met this lady 5 minutes earlier for the first time in the lobby and she is already unloading all this stuff on her. This girl started talking to me, and everything was sunshine until she kept going on about how she would plan a murder, and how often she blackmails people. I promptly ended the conversation and haven't talked to them since. My boss at the time had hired an older woman who was re-entering the workforce. He wanted to fire her the first day when she couldn't even complete the legal paperwork, maybe 20 minutes for the slowest readers, in 8 hours. He quickly lost his patience training her, so he pawned her off on me. Before the end of the first day I'd trained her, she failed at things as I explained them to her, cried, called me a bully for trying to train her too quickly. She reported me to the boss and she wanted to report me to HR for creating a hostile environment. I was actually out of town at the time, but he managed to spook her enough by asking if we should just call this hiring a mistake and have her and the company mutually part ways. She straightened up pretty quick apparently. When I came back a few days later, she's better, and more eager to learn. As we are leaving for the day, her husband is waiting for her in the parking lot with her teenage son in the back seat. I pull out in my car after they do, and the entire time her son is turned around in the back seat smiling at me through the rear windshield. The following day she tells me her son has a huge crush on me now. He thinks I'm so hot and he's going along for the ride tonight so he can see me again. Then this woman, who I have known for 3 days, tells me all of her teenage minor child's physical stats, including the size of his penis. Why a mother knows the size of her son's penis I do not wish to know. I actually had to remind this woman that I was more than a decade older than her minor child. To which she sort of laughed and said he'd be older soon enough. She did not end up working with us for long. I do a birthday gangbang every year. You can come if you want. Bring your friends if they're like you or a big dicks. Knew her for 8 hours max. Vlad the locksmith. We were doing a vehicle recovery job together. Just met the guy and we were talking on the way to the vehicle across town. I mentioned, yeah, my wife is pregnant and we are having a kid in 2 months. He light up. Vlad says his sort of girlfriend is pregnant too. Well, she's not really his girlfriend but his brother's very recent ex-girlfriend, but he's mad because he thinks it was her that gave him an STD. We get to the vehicle and I mention it's a bad neighborhood. He agrees and pulls out his gun. Don't worry bro, I got your back. Long story short, we dip out with about 5 dudes looking pretty mad in the rearview mirror. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.